Absolutely.
Yeah,
Most definitely.
absolutely.
Yeah. Like whenever I said the whisper campaign begins, it's not just in a church to get people to hush. It's also, a campaign tactic as well. It's the same thing. You don't answer the questions. You flip it around to where you make the messenger of who's telling the truth to be a liar. And you start whispering and making you can't believe them. They're just jealous.
Or
you
they're
can't.
bitter,
Mhm.
or they're not being very loving as Christ would
Right.
be. And we kept saying, if you keep hiding this, eventually it's going to make Josh worse.
Hey everyone, it's Katie from Without a Crystal Ball. Welcome back to my channel. They always say that what happens in the dark will be brought to the light. And everything that happens that people said wasn't true, if it is true, we will find out eventually. They always say that a lie travels faster than the truth, and the truth takes longer to come to light. And a lot of times that lie that takes hold, regardless of the truth to it, takes hold, and people refuse to believe the truth even once it's revealed. And that's where we find ourselves today, where there has been a conviction for Josh Duggar, and there's still a lot of people speaking out, and it's brought up a wider conversation about the problems of the parachurch organization, the Institute in Basic Life Principles, a focal part of this channel. A lot of people have told me that I talk about the Duggars a lot, but the focus for me has always been on the problematic beliefs of the Institute in Basic Life Principles and the fact that they have tried to infiltrate and influence our political systems, our social systems, our pop culture, and trying to bring back a very toxic belief system and make it mainstream. When I started covering the Duggars, the goal was to help bring people to understand the very problematic beliefs of the IBLP. And now that we have your attention, it's to help dismantle so much of what's happening and truly expose all the people that have been involved in this horrible system. So this is in conjunction with that because friends of the Duggars have been speaking out about the situation. Now,
you get some of that? Do you?
Absolutely. Well, the thing that that we keep hearing all the while, and this is what concerned us and decided that we were going to start talking, was that the evidentiary hearing on the 29th, Jim Bob said that Bobby was an elder in the church. He kept trying to paint that, and that nothing was further from the truth. So one of the things that made us want to come out also is that they kept using this, and I think even Anna to this day maybe still believes this. It's fake news. The liberal media is out to get us. The liberal media is siding with, this department where justice is really not being served because we're innocent. We talked to people that are there that night that the raid happened with Homeland Security, and the statement that came out was there is no one in this family that's under investigation, which we found out later was absolutely false.
Now, as a caveat, I just want to say this. People that are part of a group like the IBLP come into this group with a set of beliefs that are probably more extreme than you or I. They also are probably more fundamental traditionalists that believe in the patriarchy. With that said, a lot of their beliefs for the average mainstream person are going to be problematic. And unfortunately, those people that do speak out have their own baggage. And that's the problem with this group, is that every single person has done something that most of us in the real world, like outside of this fundamentalism, would call bad. Okay?
And it was all accurate and correct. And then somebody called me and said, well, it's about a civil dispute between the property, like Josh had to deal with something about how he got the property where he had his car lot. And I told him, I said, guys, jurisdictionally speaking, there is no way in this world the Homeland Security is there to settle a civil dispute. It's something much larger than that.
Okay.
And now we know what's.
With that being said, that doesn't excuse the fact that some people in the system are worse than others, and some of the things that are happening inside, some people truly have been hurt more than other people, and the ones that are getting hurt more often than not are the girls and the children. So when the trial happened, Bobby Holt testified along with Jim Holt. During the trial and before the trial, I spoke with them multiple times and found their recollections about the Duggars to be incredibly insightful, very, I thought, truthful. I believed wholeheartedly Bobby's account about what happened with Josh. I also believed wholeheartedly about the fracture in the relationship and what happened in the aftermath. And it was confirmed by other people.
Yeah. So I don't know, because, the Duggars were good at hiding it from the people they went to church with. That was very obvious. Nobody could believe when we tried to warn them about maybe their children, being in danger or watch out for certain people. They're like, well, how can you say that? These people are really pure and holy. And I remember when Kaeleigh and Josh broke up, it was all over that our daughter Kaeleigh was the one that was immoral. And what did Kaeleigh do? That the Duggars would break up with Kaeleigh, and we bore that for quite some time.
So Bobby and Jim have now lent themselves to a wider discussion about this group and trying to help people understand really the detrimental components of the group. With that being said, they are still, for the most part, Christian fundamentalists, so you're not always going to agree with everything they believe. Hope you understand that. Okay, so Jim Holt and Jim Bob Duggar, just to give you a backstory, they grow up together and they are like childhood best friends. So the two of them have childhoods where both of them have fathers that they don't emulate. So Jim is basically raised by his mom, and Jim Bob's dad is kind of a con artist that scams people, gets caught by the attorney general, selling fraudulent cars, doing consignments, selling cars like without titles. He ended up going to jail for a little bit of time. There was this huge fine that he had to pay, and they were poor. They lived in a hotel at one point, and Jim Bob had this idea that he wanted to be something better than his father. And for a lot of the guys that I've met that have been drawn into this culture with this background, it's that they lacked a father figure and they were looking for a sense of stability or a sense of control. So Jim Bob and Jim Holt become friends, and they remain friends into their adulthood. And Jim actually goes and joins the military, moves away for a little while, and then comes back to Arkansas and reconnects with the family. So during this reconnection, their kids all grow up together, and the Holts and the Duggars are very good friends. The Duggars have kids that are all sort of like interweaving in ages, and Kaeleigh Holt, who is their oldest daughter, is actually 2 days, her birthday I think is either 2 days before or after Josh Duggar. Kaeleigh and Josh, having grown up together, being raised together, at the point that they become teenagers, decide that they like each other and apparently approach their parents about potentially having a betrothal or getting married because they're 14 and it's fundamentalism and they think that that's what they're going to do. So
marrying Josh to your oldest daughter, was that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And
I want to make it clear that Kaeleigh and Josh were the ones that came to us about the other person. So she was interested in him, he was interested in us or her, and so we didn't set it up.
Right.
He came to us, and Josh went to his parents.
They were in church. They were in church together, and they were
raised together. I mean,
right.
They're the same age. They're just 2 days apart, and
what they're gonna do.
So
they enter into what's called a betrothal, which is like an arranged marriage. But Bobby will say that it wasn't arranged. But really, in this world, the dads would have to agree to the situation, and the parents would have to agree to it. It's a family decision. So as a part of the betrothal, basically what it means is that they are promising that they're going to get married. Mind you, they're 14 years old at this point. In the real world, that's very young to be making that kind of decision. But in that world, they believed that they wanted to be married. Unfortunately, during this time, apparently this is around the same time that Josh starts doing things to his sisters. So he starts around the age of 12 and up until he's like 15. Apparently this is going on. He's involved with Kaeleigh. Mind you, a betrothal is not they don't touch. They're not holding hands. They're not kissing. They're literally barely alone together, because in the world of fundamentalism, that's just not how it works. So it's mostly like, I just like you, you like me, we're going to get married. So it creates a sense of, you are going to be my future husband. And it also creates a sense of closeness, I think, from the child to the parents that are like the in-laws. And in a deposition, Kaeleigh, who is now the ex-girlfriend, was talking about how she really viewed Jim Bob and Michelle as in-laws. So we know now that through Bobby's testimony that in March of 2003, they invite them over and they basically tell them about what's happened, because Josh has done something to his sister and it's horrible. And they need him to come clean, and they come clean because he's in a relationship with Kaeleigh. And Bobby described this as though they looked at it as though Josh was cheating on her. Now, Kaeleigh said in a deposition that they told them about it because of the relationship that they had and the fact that Josh had done something behind Kaleigh's back, but also the fact that Jim, her dad, was a chaplain that worked with SOs, juvenile SOs, and they needed help and advice from their best friend.
We've just seen it to be over and over a pattern of minimizing and shifting the blame.
And not answering questions.
And that's some of the same thing that was said to us, is that, we said that was molestation. And we were told, don't you dare say that. It wasn't, it was inappropriately touching. And so, Mark, I remember when I shared this with you years back. I mean, I think you even told me like, oh, I didn't think it was that bad, because, how do you say that? I mean, we were very inexperienced with it at the time, but how do you say something that evil and that gross has happened with somebody that appears that perfect, and they really look at you like you're the crazy person? And then now 19 years later, we've been validated.
So Josh is removed from the home, and in the deposition, Kaeleigh describes how he leaves the house. He's gone for 3 months. Jim Bob wants him to come back for his birthday, and then Josh never goes back. Bobby and Jim Holt have said that he went to the training center in Arkansas, the Little Rock Training Center for the IBLP, which is it's like in the old veterans building in Little Rock, and that's where Josh went and obviously didn't get better. Comes home, and there's a huge disruption at the church. Families are at this point still not really knowing what's going on, and they are at this point split up, and nobody's saying why. So because nobody is saying why they split up, Kaeleigh starts getting blamed for what happened in the relationship. And apparently the Duggars are telling people that the reason why Josh had to go away and the reason why Josh did what he did to his sisters was because she wasn't good enough for him and she caused him to stray. So in a sworn deposition, Kaeleigh describes how she had not really told a lot of people about what was going on, and she was also not really talking to the Duggars about what had happened. This was after 2003, after they split up, but she's approached by Michelle's niece named Rachel, who happens to be Tyler's mom, and this is what she says happens when Rachel approaches her. It was Michelle's niece, Rachel Hutchins, had come up to me, and we talked previously about how I'd been accused or blamed for a lot of what was happening. And she was really angry, blaming me, and asked me basically how I could have messed up to where Josh would not have wanted me anymore. I was kind of the perception that had gone around from what I had gathered, that the people that were upset about it had blamed me, that basically Josh didn't deserve me because I had gossiped. So when Josh was reported to the police, it was because she had written a letter And the letter was found in a book, which we'll get to in a second. And my parents relayed that to me based on the other parents that were talking. I don't think I actually had anyone directly comment to me about that except for Rachel. I was pretty shocked because I was unaware of what Jim Bob and Michelle were telling their family. Rachel did not come to the church, and so she was an outside source from someone like that we all knew but didn't actually come to the church. So I was surprised by her account of what had happened, that it was my fault. So Kaeleigh says that she finds out that she's being blamed for what happened after Josh was reported to the police. So what happened and how Josh was reported to the police was in 2003, she finds out from her parents in the deposition. She explains that her dad tells her about what Josh had done and they had to be broken up. They thought it would be best for them. So they break up. She writes a letter. She said she journaled a lot, and because of that, she wrote down what happened. She put in the letter what Josh had done, that he had done something to his sisters, and she put the letter in a book that she was reading. The book was a Christian love, like a romantic series for girls, and she was like writing a letter to the author of that series. She never intended to send the letter. It was just a way for her, she said, to get it off of her chest. So a couple years later, in 2006, a friend of hers from church named Gabby asks to borrow the book, and she gives Gabby the book. Gabby starts reading the book, and she finds the letter. Gabby gives the letter to her parents, who would then share the letter with other people at church. And when other people find out about the letter, then they confront Jim Bob. So a woman named Dasha Nichols is the woman who actually contacted the hotline in Arkansas and reported what Josh had done. They apparently confronted Jim Bob about what had happened. Jim Bob had basically acted like there was nothing that they needed to do, that everything had been handled. And at that point, there was a group that split, including the Holts, that believed that they had to separate because they needed to be reported to police. So the home church, the way that she described it, was like 100 people. Now, or like several families with a lot of kids, and there was like a group that wanted nothing to do with it, didn't want to get involved, a group that believed they should be reported, and a group that believed they shouldn't be reported. Because her parents were part of the group that believed they should be reported to the police, then the Duggars blamed the Holts for turning them in, and as Kaeleigh described by Rachel, they start blaming her for what happened. Now, with the Holts having testified, they're actually been talking more openly about the cult and how the cult works and how they now believe that it is a cult, and have described some of the tactics that have happened. Now, understanding that Kaeleigh was blamed for what Josh did to his sisters should give you an understanding of how Anna is likely being blamed for what Josh did with the videos. If people in the group want to say that he's guilty, they might look at Anna and say, well, it's her fault. She wasn't giving him enough whatever, and he had to look for it elsewhere. They would not look at this as a crime, but rather as cheating.
Consider that maybe we're doing something wrong and we need to repent. But if they get this idea that, no, I'm God's man of power for the hour, see, if they put themselves in the seat of Christ as I'm the anointed, don't mess with God's anointed, then
That's what we were told.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what you were told. Yes. And it turns toxic. It does the exact opposite of what authentic Christianity should do to political leaders. Make them humble,
or church members, even fellow believers.
Yeah. Or pastors. Exactly. You know, because we have the same situation with pastors. It goes right to their head. Anybody coming against them or asking them questions, you're coming against them unfairly, and shame on you for causing division in the body. Really, the one that causes division in the body is the one that takes the anointing away from Christ and takes it on themselves, tries to take it on themselves.
We were even told one time.
Jim described in an interview about how they minimized it and said that it wasn't child M, but it was inappropriate touching. And he believed it was a way for them to not have to deal with the magnitude of it, and they Jim Bob actually got mad when they called it what it was. So the way that they explained it is that everything that happened with them is what has happened with Jill. They became like the people that were wrong because they had questions. They were ostracized by the Duggars because they questioned them and believed that they should have been sent to, Josh should have been investigated by police. Because that is what happened, the Duggars then cut ties with them and sort of start smearing their reputation with their friends. So anyone that speaks out becomes the devil, becomes like not godly. And then they also have this belief that they are the anointed from God, which I've told you about, but hearing them actually say it, they feel as though they're exalted. They feel as though they are the chosen. And so they feel as though some of this is for the greater good. Like when Holt said that he was told by people that were in the circles before the trial that he should not testify because the Duggars had done so much good for the greater good of the ministry, that this was just a part of it they had to ignore. Kind of, they likened it to the way that like priests were doing really good things for the communities, so they got to do the things to the kids, which isn't true. So they were basically making it seem like the Duggars in many ways were like the exalted, the anointed, the chosen of the group, and it was their job to like save the group and save the world. So you have people around the Duggars that are literally looking at the Duggars as gods. He even said at one point that Jim Bob stops talking to God and just admits to him that he just makes decisions on his own as though he is God.
I'm told one time that, this was told to us by Jim Bob, is like, you get to the point where you make one good decision after another, and before too long, you get to thinking that you've got this figured out, and you stop asking God about each decision.
I've told you before that Jim Bob tells people that he's a prophet, and I've told you before that friends of his have told me that he has a God complex. I think you should understand now, being the way that they're describing how Jim Bob is acting and how the people around them are saying it's for the greater good. Let Josh do this. It's for the greater good. It's sick. They feel justified and they feel in a way like this is a test from God. So this is going to become the testimony of what happens when someone steps outside of the umbrella, and it will be the testimony of how they themselves can overcome adversity and come to the other side. So they're being used by God to send a message. That's literally how this group will turn this into a positive, so that they don't have to admit the negative, or they will completely deny that this happened. As Jim also said in the same video, Anna believes that this could still be a liberal agenda of them not liking them because they're Christians. Long story short, Kaeleigh was blamed for Josh doing the things that he did to his sisters. Can you imagine being a teenage girl and being told as a teenage girl that it's your fault that your boyfriend SA'd his sisters, and it's because you weren't a good enough girlfriend? Now put yourself in Anna's shoes and realize that she's likely hearing the same thing from the same people in the same group, that it's her fault that Josh did this if they believe he's guilty because, she didn't do it enough. All right. So this world is a humongous cult. It's a huge problem. And I'm still taking tips from people about other people in the group that have done bad things like Josh. I recently got a tip about a group of men, the Denton brothers. They were an a cappella group. One of the brothers is actually in prison for CSA for the second time. There's a lot of IBLP boys, now men, that have gone through this system that are in prison for the same type of thing that Josh is in. So if you know someone that's gone through or is in prison or has had charges, make sure you send me some tips. I'm highlighting all of these stories so we can expose all of the people so that people truly understand that this is not just about Josh. This is a huge issue within this fundamentalist sect. All right, you guys, what are your thoughts about the Duggars blaming Kaeleigh? I feel so bad that she had that burden on her, and it's just simply not fair. I'm grateful that the Holts are speaking out and using this, and I hope that they've learned the dangers of a group like this and that they don't make the same mistakes that they did in the past. All right, you guys, tell me your thoughts in the comments below. Bye.